Peace and blessings, family. It's me, Coach 67 Sports TV. Shout out to the awesome and amazing LDBC, Lions Den Broadcasting Community. Shout out to the Louisiana All-American Sports Network. And shout out to the greatest university in the world, the Southern University, home of the mighty Jaguars. In this particular video, I'm going to pretty much wrap up like the conversation Scotty and I had, prior to me going to my seat for last week's Southern University homecoming game against Alcorn State. And, if, you wondering like what the conversation was like or whatever, the first part of, this particular video, it's in the video section, so go check it out. But up until this point, like basically the gist of our conversation was, how, my channel is pretty much like built around Southern University. And like the perception of him is like that he's, I guess, kind of anti-Southern University. And he was saying like, he's not anti-Southern University. He just don't see what all the hype around Southern University, was. And basically, I kind of told him about the golden era of Southern University, basically from like 93 to like 99, even though they also won the SWAC championship to 2003. Basically, I was telling them, hey, Coach Richardson, when he came in 93, of course, not to take away anything from Coach Richardson, he the greatest Southern University coach I've seen in my lifetime, but, he had a phenomenal program, but he got a lot of transfers from LSU, like, Michael Hayes and Nemesis Bates and Jermaine Sharp and Chris Cooper. And, he was like, yeah, I saw like highlights of Michael Hayes. He was a beast. I'm like, yeah, I had classes with Mike Hayes at Southern. I had a few classes with him. So, yeah, I'm like, Mike Hayes was a beast, you know what I'm saying? And, we talked about how, Southern University, and, Coach Richardson in particular, how he benefited, from transfers from, LSU. And, how you had Brian Lee on his channel. And, Brian Lee kind of was on the tail end of Coach Richardson's tenure at Southern University. And, he and I didn't talk about this, but, I kind of watched over the years, watching football over the years, I watched the game pass like legendary coaches by, like Tom Landry, Don Shula, even many people, even though I don't consider him, he was definitely a legend. Many people consider Eddie Robinson the greatest HBCU coach like ever. Of course, being I'm a Southern University fan, Southern University guy, I say A.W. Mumford, Arnett, William Ace Mumford is the greatest HBCU coach ever, but that's another story. But, I saw the same thing with Coach Richardson. The game kind of passed him by at the end, when they lost to Prairie View, his last home game in Southern. I knew it was kind of time for him to hang it up. But, basically, we talked about the golden era of Southern University. And then, so I guess Brian Lee really, he didn't tell him what the mystique about Southern University was. And then he and I, we talked about Dawson Odoms. And I'm not going to lie, I was a proponent of keeping Dawson Odoms at the time. And, I was kind of explaining it to him that, part of the reason why they pivoted to Jason Rollins was because, the player, kind of like now, the players like Coach Terrence Graves. That's why, the players wanted him. At the time, Southern had a senior-heavy team the same way Gerald Kimball left a senior-heavy team for Coach Richardson, and Coach Richardson took over that senior-heavy team, and he won the SWAC championship, and he kind of started his legacy as the dean of the SWAC. Jason Rollins was kind of in a favorable position, but things really didn't pan out. And now I have not been able to confirm nor deny this rumor, but basically I was telling Scotty, like, a couple of people I talked to behind the scenes, they said the plan was for Southern University if Jason Rollins didn't make it, to pivot to Marshall Faulk, because Marshall Faulk had interest in Southern University and Southern University had interest in Marshall Faulk. So it was mutual, but after the whole NFL Network scandal kind of hit, I guess they just pivoted and went another direction. But, you know, I was a proponent of Dawson Nolan, but a lot of Southern University, you know, faithful and members of Jaguar Nation, they were anti-Dawson Nolan. One, because he didn't come from that Coach Pete Richardson coaching tree, but more than anything, that mystique and that aura that Southern University had from the 90s, you know, many members of Jaguar Nation like myself, like, you know, we urinate excellence. We only expect the best. And the fact that he couldn't get over that Alcorn State hump and that he was considered to be second best behind Alcorn State to a lot of Southern University fans, like, that was unacceptable. And that was part of that, like, mystique of Southern University. And, you know, we didn't go into, like, depth and detail. You know, we just kind of talked about the surface in terms of, you know, the whole Dawson Odom, Jason Rollins, like, Marshall Faulk thing. And I didn't like the way Southern kind of pivoted into Coach Dooley. Like, hey, he lost to Jackson State today. And then, you know, a couple of days later, hey, we have the press conference, Coach Dooley going to be our next head coach. And I didn't like the way Southern University did that. And basically, that was kind of like the gist of the conversation. You know, we pretty much, you know, we talked about, like, kind of like, from my perspective, like, kind of our opposing points of view, you know. And, you know, he just was saying, like, hey, it's not that he's anti-Southern, but basically, you know, he didn't see what the hype was. And like I said, that was kind of before he really started following the SWAC. And, you know, he didn't get to see, like, the golden era of Southern University under Pete Richardson, like, with the dominance and everything, you know. And, you know, we just basically, you know, we talked about, you know, how, you know, Coach Richardson, how he transformed the program and how he had players like Mike Hayes and you know, we talked about the coaching situation with Dawson Odom and Jason Rollins and Marshall Faulk and Coach Dooley. And basically, you know, just the golden era of Southern University. But just to kind of cap off the whole thing, you know, my brother, Jay Good, you know, of course, Jay Good and I, we met at the meet and greet for us LDBC family members in Dallas. And I'm not going to lie, in the comment section of the previous video, like, Jay Good, he had the perfect response to, like, the conversation Scotty and I had, like, part one of it. And basically, what Jay Good said was, you know, for individuals that really weren't around in the 90s, because, you know, I graduated from Southern. Jay Good actually played football at Southern under Coach Richardson. And kind of like the Dallas Cowboys thing, you know, Southern University had this mystique, like this storied tradition behind it. And, like, of course, with the Cowboys, it was in the 70s and in the 90s. Whereas that golden era for Southern University, it kind of ran concurrent with the dominance of the Dallas Cowboys. And if you really, basically he was saying, like, if you weren't around in that era and you didn't live in that time frame, like, you really can't relate to it. You don't understand it. You know, to somebody like Scotty, like, Southern University fans, we kind of romanticize the golden era of Pete Richardson from, like, 93 to 99. Because even that 03 SWAC championship team, you know, led by Quincy Richard, I'm going to be truthful. Like, the fanfare around that team still wasn't as good as, like, the fanfare around, like, that 93 team, that 95 team. So even though, like, they were, you know, they were just as dominant on the field in 03 as they was in 93, you know, I guess it didn't hit the same for a lot of members of Southern University in terms of Jaguar Nation. And basically what he was saying was, you know, it was not only, like, the talented teams of the 90s, but, you know, the total the Southern University experience, you know, the campus life, the fact that it had a party school persona, you had public figures that basically came up through Southern University that turned out to be legends. Like, for example, many people don't know, like, David Banner was the SGA president at Southern University. And not only that, at that time frame, if you look at like Bayou Classics of the past, like those Bayou Classic with Southern University was just dominant. You would see people like, at the time, heavyweight champion of the world, Evander Holyfield, on the sideline, like with the dancing dolls, during the Bayou Classic. You know, Scotty really, he probably don't know that, and he probably don't understand that. And not only that, but Southern University is the biggest, HBCU system in the country. You know what I'm saying? I mean, Southern University, it has a law school, it has a school of nursing, it has a school of engineering, a school of business. It has a Baton Rouge location, a New Orleans location, a Shreveport location. And, all these components or facets of Southern University, other universities and even other HBCUs don't have that. So Southern University had all these things, still to this day has it going for them. But in the 90s, they had all these things going for them besides just the dominant football program. It had a lot of intrigue around it. And it was showcased and featured greatly when it came to black college football. At the time it was BET, really for the exception of the Bayou Classic. They didn't have no SWAC network, HBCU Game Day, HBCU Go, whatever. It really was BET, and Southern was featured prominently on BET at the time. So, of course, Scotty probably don't, he probably don't know this. And, at the time, Southern University, it was a complete vibe. When I went to Southern University, it was called the Southern University experience. It was a complete vibe. Southern University was the gold standard of HBCU schools, and especially HBCU football at the time. And this pride that we have in Southern University, being tied back to that golden era, people like Scotty, he kind of confused it as arrogance. And, the same thing could be said for Jackson State fan base, and probably to a certain degree FAMU and Alcorn State's fan base. But when it comes to Southern's fan base and Jackson State's fan base, we consider it to be the two most arrogant fan bases in all of HBCU football. And I think that's why Scotty has the perception he has of Southern University and Southern University's fan base, and Jackson State and Jackson State's fan base. So that's probably why he has the outlook and perception that he has of Southern and Jackson State. And this something else Scotty probably don't know. In those mid to late 90s, if you look at 1AA football, well, it's called FCS now, for multiple years, Southern and Jackson State back and forth, they led all of 1AA in attendance for a long stretch, back and forth. One year, Southern would lead in attendance. Then the next year would be Jackson State. Then the next year was Southern. Then the next year was Jackson State. And of course, the last time Jackson State came to A.W. Mumford Stadium, Jackson State fan and I was arguing about it. He was like, oh no, we dominate attendance every year. Y'all dominate attendance every year now. But we talking about in these mid to late 90s. And he, in his mind, even back then, it still was J State. And I'm like, man, look, bro, I'm not trying to gas up Southern more than I'm trying to gas them up. If you want, I'm if you don't believe me, go Google it. You know what I'm saying? And, that's what it was. Southern and Jackson State, they had when it came to 1AA attendance, they led 1AA attendance every year. In fact, it was so much so when Jackson State would come to A.W. Mumford Stadium, instead of them coming to Baton Rouge, it was a time period where Southern and Jackson State, for Southern's home game, they were playing the Superdome. They tried to make it the Boombox Classic is now, but Southern fan base is more of a traveling fan base. They prefer to kind of travel on the road, whereas Jackson State's fan base is kind of whatever with them. And that's why you get, that's part of the reason why, of course you got to look through my videos, through the catalog. That's part of the reason why I don't go to Jackson when Southern play against Jackson State, because in the mid-90s, especially in the mid-90s, in my opinion, they used to oversell those tickets. They was Veteran Memorial Stadium, they hold X amount of thousand. Just say, for example, hypothetically, just say it hold 50,000. Oh, we had 48,000 attendance. I'm like, man, that's a lie. Every seat was full. And you got people like literally sitting all in the aisleway. Southern fans, Jackson State fans, Southern fans. And I'm like, nah, bro. Like, there's no way. They might have said that, so the fire marshal could kind of stay off of them. But to me, especially in that time frame, they always used to oversell those tickets. And that's why I seen was like, hey, we never going back to that game. Because I'm not a claustrophobic individual. And I'm not going to lie, I felt smothered at the time, you know what I'm saying? And, not only what I just talked about in terms of like the arrogance of the Southern fan base and even to a certain degree the Jackson State fan base, but, he was like, not those two things not matching in terms of the product he sees on the field now and like the mystique and the aura about it. I guess he can't relate. And even now, like anything less than that standard from back then when it comes to Southern fan base, anything less than that is unacceptable. And that's part of the reason why a portion of Southern University, it wasn't for some fans, it wasn't the fact that he didn't come from that Coach Pete Richardson tree. I think part of it was the case, but the fact that in some of the members of Jaguar Nation's eyes, like he was second to Alcorn. You let Alcorn surpass us and it's happened on your watch. Like us not being number one is unacceptable. So that was the reason why a lot of Southern University fans, they were like anti-Dawson Nolan because we should beat everybody. We shouldn't lose to Alcorn. And if you were dominant the way Coach Richardson was, then you wouldn't be in the position you in, you know what I'm saying? And of course, Southern University, like Jay Good put it, it was a brand, and people like Scotty, since he wasn't around in that time frame, like he really don't get it. Like Southern University, especially in that time frame, it really was a brand. I mean, it was a brand. It was a gold standard of excellence in HBCU football. And I think that kind of the only teams that really could rival it at that time was Jackson State, FAMU, and on a lesser degree, to a much lesser degree, Alcorn State. So, I think, I was just kind of enlightening him. And, that's what we used to call a Southern University experience. And, a couple things I didn't mention even, Jay Good didn't mention. Because I'm not going to lie, he hit the nail on the head. Like, he pretty much nailed every point. The only thing he kind of left out was, like, in those mid to late 90s, like, every year, like, it seems like the Human Jukebox was ranked number one by USA Today in terms of, like, being the best black college or the best HBCU band. Human Jukebox was, I think, as great as they are now, they were, like, in rare form at the time. And, of course, at the time, girls weren't allowed in the Human Jukebox. Of course, that's another story for another day. And not only that, but, like, the Dancing Dolls. He brought this up on, the portion of his live stream I saw. He was talking about the Southern University experience. He was saying how, like, when it comes to, like, the baddest, like, light-skinned, red-bone, high-yellow chicks, like, Southern University has it. And you got to realize that was part of that brand. Of course, us being kind of like a Creole melting pot down here in South Louisiana, that's part of it. But, like, Southern University, the Dancing Dolls, like, that's part of, like, hey, all we got is red bones. Just like, for example, Grambling, like, their dance team is like, it's all like dark chocolate, whereas Southern University, you got these little high yellow Dancing Dolls at the time. Of course, Southern University kind of moved away from that. I guess they kind of want to be, you don't want to be labeled as all we got is these high yellow Dancing Dolls. So they kind of moved away from that. But that was Southern University's brand in the 90s when it came to the Dancing Dolls, when it came to the Human Jukebox. In terms of bands, it was a standard of excellence. And then the last thing, of course, the Greek life, when it comes to, like, the sororities, the fraternities, when it comes to, like, the Q Dolls and the Kappas and the AKAs and because even when, you watch College Hill, that was one of the things that was really, like, kind of featured prominent on, like, the last episode, the Greek life, even, like, for homecoming week, you had the talent show, you had the comedy show, you had the homecoming concert, and you had that Friday was the Greek show. And, of course, I really wasn't too much into the Greek show, but, that's one thing that's real prominent in HBCU culture. So all of these things, when I went to Southern, it kind of made up the positive aspects of the Southern University experience. And of course, from the negative aspects, the thing I used to hate was the bureaucracy where, hey, if you needed something done, you would go to, building A, and they would send you to B, and B would send you to C, and you would end up all the way to building G, and then you would get to building G, and they would send you back to A, and then they would take care of what you wasted like 3 hours, and they could have taken care of it from the beginning. And I'm like, man, you sent me all around campus, and this could have been done like immediately. And of course, the financial aid aspect, I never really, for the most part, most of the time in Southern, I wasn't on financial aid, but a couple of times I had to deal with the financial aid office. Financial aid was like an all-day process. So just, getting classes taken care of. If you wasn't paying out of pocket, like literally, this was gonna be an all-day thing from like 8 o'clock that morning to like 5 o'clock that evening. And there are instances where, I paid tuition and they would purge the system and they would kick my class out the system. And I'm like, hey, man, I paid my tuition. And they would just go back and put them in the system. But, the bureaucracy, the red tape, the financial aid issues, those were kind of like the small, like negative aspects of it. But in terms of everything else, like the dominance on the field, especially in the mid to late 90s, the early, like from 93 to like 99, the dominance on the football field, the party school persona, like Jay Good hit every point, and it was excellent in terms of Southern University. But, for the most part, it pretty much caps off like the conversation. It's every aspect of the conversation Scotty and I had. We talked about, Coach Richardson. We talked about, the golden era excellence. We talked about the coaching situation from Coach Pete Richardson, the Dawson Odoms. Well, we didn't talk about Stump Mitchell. That's something I really don't. That's a bad time, bad era in Southern University football. But we talked about Dawson Odoms. We talked about Jason Rollins, Marshall Falk, Coach Dooley. The transfer. How the NIL day and age that we in now is different than, back then you were able to transfer from LSU to Southern and walk right in the start lineup and become an All-American and become an NFL prospect. So we talked about that. It was an excellent and productive conversation, but Jay Good had the perfect rebuttal, and he answered everything in terms of things that Scotty might be unaware of. But that's it for this video. If you found any value in this video, please like the video, share the video, comment in the comment section, subscribe to the channel. Also, click the notification bell so you can be alerted anytime I post any new videos. And if you did not catch episode 4 of HBCU Fanatics with myself and my brother Jerry Lovin Green, go check that out. Hopefully, y'all have a blessed, phenomenal day. Catch y'all on the rebounds. Peace and blessings. And go Jags!